Thank you, Sita. Very informative. I think it's the experience of the beneficiary which arrives from both the last mile infrastructure as well as the choice architecture, which everybody's been speaking about. We'll now move on to Sanchita to talk about the experiences of business correspondents. And we know for sure this is a much debated, much written about piece of infrastructure which hasn't gone and delivered what it was supposed to do. But I still believe it's work in progress. So.
Good afternoon. Today I'm going to share SEWA's experience as a business correspondent in Uttarakhand. But before we became a business correspondent in Uttarakhand, we had actually entered Uttarakhand to give financial literacy to the 1,000 plus SAGs which were not running regularly. And we were giving them, inculcating habits of good financial discipline. When we went to Uttarakhand, we did not find physical banks within 10 to 12 kilometers. And when we interacted with the women and men, we found that these men and women did not have bank accounts. So we became very curious and asked, where do they save their money? Women invariably said that they secretly save their money away from the men. And we also noticed that in Uttarakhand, where we were interacting in these remote villages, the youth population seemed missing. So we asked them, where are the youth? So we found them that most of the youth had migrated for higher studies or for employment. So interestingly, we asked them, when they migrate for higher studies, don't you have to send them fees, money for expenses? They said yes. And when you have employable children outside the state, how do they send back money, or they don't send back money? They said, oh yes, they do send back money, but it is through the post office. And the postman comes and delivers it at the doorstep, but they come only once a quarter or once in every 4 months. So that was the financial service or access that time. Anyway, we worked there for about 4 districts for about a couple of years, and we left them being financially literate, but with no financial access solution. Till in 2009, these villages were started getting listed as unbanked villages. And one of the public sector bank approached us to give financial services at the doorstep. And we thought the doorstep service would be the best service, and we became the business correspondent of this public sector bank in 2009. Parallelly, we also were trying to reach these villages through the business correspondent model, reaching the mandate of the government to reach 74,200 villages by 2012. We thought that the best service at the doorstep could be delivered by the women from the community itself. So we started interacting with these women, and we thought, let us look for women who are accepted in the community. And the bank had this rule that the CSP, the customer service point, whom we call as SEWA Bank Sathi, should have an education qualification of class 10th. So we were bound by this rule to look for women who had class 10 school qualification and yet poor enough to pick up this kind of work, because the commission that she was earning was very low. Because Uttarakhand did not have any employable opportunities, we found a few women who were ready to travel across various districts, various villages, braving the bad weather and the wild animals, and we slowly made a network of these women. So in 2009, we appointed these CSPs amongst the community women, and slowly in 2011-12, we expanded to other districts, like we started from Almora, we went to Bageshwar, and in Pithoragarh, and by the time we had opened more than 11,000 accounts. And we had also trained around 50 women as the CSPs, and they were giving door-to-door services. And in Uttarakhand, we also find lots of old people. And through our services, 800 pensioners were reached, and the money of the pension would come at their doorstep. 2014, we again made progress. We added another district, Champawat. And by now, we had opened more than 67,000 accounts. And we also opened Jan Dhan accounts, Atal pension accounts. And by now, we had trained almost 140 women CSPs across 4 districts. But unfortunately, in 2014, there was a shift in technology in this public sector bank. So for the handheld device which was going to the doorstep, the technology shifted as an immobile kiosk machine. And so essentially, the service was no longer at the doorstep. The community people had to come to this particular kiosk to take this service. And the pensioners had a lot of problem because the logistics is not suitable for them to travel. And we saw gradually in 2016, there was a major drop in active accounts, and we lost many of our trained CSPs. We saw that we had opened quite a few bank accounts, but slowly, the gap between the active bank accounts and the total bank accounts widened. And in 2016, it was quite wide. We had 83,000 accounts we had opened, and only 33,000 accounts were active, where people were getting and making transactions on their own. Parallelly, we also saw that the CSPs started losing interest, and the 140 CSPs were lost, and we were left with only 15. We examined what are the decelerators for these, and one we thought was the incentive structure. Second, which I'll explain. Second, we thought the credit support that is needed to become a CSP. Then we also saw that there was very little or no initiative from the bank to do financial literacy. The technology was not suitable for that place, and the infrastructure, of course, had a lot of barriers. In the incentive structure, when we started in 2009, SEWA entered because the objective of SEWA was more of social rather than commercial. So SEWA invested heavily on the initial security deposit in the bank. SEWA invested in buying a few handheld devices for the women to compensate for the low commissions that they were earning. That time, the commission that they were earning was only 15 rupees per account. And they were getting 0.5% on every withdrawal and 0.25% on deposit. And this is a very low population area, so it was not making commercial sense. Even if the CSP was traveling about 10 to 15 kilometers by foot, because there was no transport available though, she could barely make 3,000 if she was lucky, 3,000 to 5,000. In 2015, there was some discussion about the commission structure. So there was improvement about the per account opening cost. So instead of 15, she was getting 40 rupees. But the withdrawal rate and the deposit rate remained the same. But additionally, for every 25 transactions, she was being given 2,000 rupees. And for every new account, 25 new accounts, she was additionally given 2,000 rupees. But since the technology had moved to a kiosk, now that there was an additional condition that the CSP had to have this log in to the system for at least 12 hours in the day. And there was not enough engagement for her. And because the infrastructure was poor, the access to internet was also very difficult, and this condition was proving very difficult for them. So the CSPs was, again, not making enough money. Regarding the credit support, when the CSP had to invest in these handheld devices, we linked her with the banks which was providing her with credit. It was slightly difficult for the papers and all, but she had to borrow 25,000 to buy those handheld devices, a biometric device and a printer. And she was not earning enough to repay those loans. But within a few years, when the technology changed, this became obsolete. Now we went to the bank because the technology change was not her fault. It was towards betterment. but she was not compensated. Not only was she not compensated, she became an non-performing asset, and she could not take credit for the next level of kiosk, which needed 45,000. So again, she could not make a transition to upgrade her technology. We found that the CSPs, being a woman, was a very good choice, because women do reach to the doorstep, do interact with the community members. They bring a baggage of other services. But to get women investing into these resources, to have their own capital into their business, it becomes very difficult when they have to borrow. 25,000, 45,000 is a huge amount for these CSPs who come from villages. And when they have to give those outright cash distribution, they also need to have certain amount of revolving fund with them. So they need also to have this revolving fund invested in the bank. But that kind of support was not being received by the bank. And during 14-15, they were again under the burden of paying off the old loans, then making very little money, because they were not being able to use those technology. So that was a very disturbing time when many of the CSPs were labeled as NPAs. We also found that doing financial literacy in these villages before linking them into a bank is always helpful, but it needs resources. But from the bank's point of view, this is seen as expense rather than investment. So with our knowledge of financial literacy, we could reach out to as many as possible. But from the bank's part, we found that there was a gap. Switching to kiosk machines from the handheld devices also caused a lot of barrier amongst the women men and women who had to go to find their pension to the nearest bank or the nearest kiosk point. So the pensioners had a lot of difficulty, because now the money could not be given at their doorstep. And the technology in Uttarakhand, particularly shifting to a mobile technology to a kiosk, was proving to be very difficult. The kiosk is the previous technology did not need internet for the whole day. You could upload it at the end of the day, the transaction, but kiosk, it had to be internet driven, and it had to be online. Unfortunately, in Uttarakhand, most of the places suffer from low connectivity. So it was not suitable, the infrastructure was not ready to take up this change in technology. What we feel that the incentives definitely need some attention, and it has to be more standardized, and it has to be more goal-driven. And the CSP's training also need to be done along with the training of the community leaders for financial literacy. The CSPs should have better access to capital, or women-friendly loan products for the CSPs should be available, and the connectivity definitely has to be looked into. We also feel that it is not possible for the CSPs in the long run to reach each and every customer. So the customers also have to be digitally literate to check their own balances, to make certain transfers from their own mobile, to make unassisted services available. So digital literacy also needs to be taken up. We feel that the universal financial inclusion can be achieved through synergistic effort between the mainstream financial entities and the players at the last mile. Thank you.